everyone. Welcome to another episode of Writer's Chat. We're so glad that you are joining us today. My name is Johnnie Alexander, and I'm joined today as co-host. Melissa Stroh is with me. And then we're also asking our community to stay on if they want to, while we talk about Brandilyn Collins' book, Getting into Character. I want to make sure I get the title right. Getting into Character, 7 Secrets a Novelist Can Learn from Actors. So what we're going to do is ask everybody in the community who wants to stay on during this time. Melissa and I are going to sort of take turns with these 7 secrets. I'm going to do a quick intro. Then Melissa's going to start out with secret number 1. And then I will do secret number 2. Because the first secret really lays a foundation for all the other secrets that come after it, we'll probably spend more time on it in secret number 2 than some of the others, but we will try to get through all of them as best we can. So again, we're really glad that you're joining us today to talk about how to get into character by using secrets learned from method acting. Now, Brandilyn Collins wrote this book because she had first majored in college as in theater. So she was an actress, studying to be an actress and studying method acting. When she decided to write novels, it was very intuitive for her and made sense for her, hey Sophie, to just kind of use those same techniques as she was writing. But then when she would talk to other novelists about it, they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. So she realized she was doing something different. And what she was sort of doing from what she had learned and kind of doing intuitively, she really paid attention to what she was doing, how she was doing it, and distilled all that information down so she could start teaching it to other writers. And that ended in her book, Getting into Character. So just another couple little intro things. Stanislavski is like the pioneer of method acting, and he believed actors should take on the characters' inner lives. So that's very important as novelists, that we do that too with our characters, that we really understand them. And he said this was achieved by discovering their emotions and their motivations. So those are 2 things that we're really going to be talking about this morning. And then Brandilyn says this, which is really cool. Good fiction can be defined with 5 C's. Convincing characters, caught in compelling conflict. So I'll put that in the chat so that you can see it. Convincing characters, caught in compelling conflict. That's a novel. And 2 more quick points. These techniques are important for your main characters, of course, for important supporting characters. You do not have to do this for all your characters if they're just like walk-in parts. Don't worry about it. And the more familiar you become with these secrets, because they can seem overwhelming when you first read the book, the easier it'll be. She likens it to driving a car. That, when the first time you drove a car, you didn't know what you were doing. You didn't know how to even put it in gear that you'd seen your parents do it a million times. You're sort of awkward with all those steps. But it gets easier and easier and easier. And now we drive and we think, oh gosh, I'm home already. How did I even get here? Because I wasn't really paying that much attention. But that's the way this will become too. The more you use these techniques, the more you delve into them, the easier they'll become. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, and she's going to talk about the very first secret.
Okay. Well, first off, I will apologize to everybody. I don't quite have my notes down, so you may see me looking off to the side frequently to refresh and remember the words I'm trying to use. I get tunnel vision really easy when I'm talking about these subjects, but this is definitely one of my favorite topics to talk about. And secret number 1 in Brandilyn's book is called Personalizing. We learn the basic facts about our characters by interviewing our characters. And this is a process that is my ultimate favorite one when it comes to writing a novel. I love character sketches and interviewing my characters and building upon them. For me, there's nothing that's a bigger turnoff in a novel than to read cardboard characters that are just 2-dimensional. There's no depth to them. I believe characters drive our novels, and I like to get to know mine. And so Brandilyn developed this, or talks about this method of questioning your characters in an interview kind of style to get into the depths of beyond just their superficial appearances. You know, when we create a character, we initially want to, you know, envision what they look like, their stature, their hair color, their eye color, who are they, what's their job. Then maybe some of us, if we probe a little deeper, we might get into a reason for why they have a job. Like she gives an example of the military man and a rich woman, and he goes so far to say that the military man wants to be in the military because his dad and his grandfather were in the military. And then some people will stop right there and say, oh, that's enough. I know how this guy looks. I know he's in the military and he wants to be in because his family was in the military. But that doesn't give you the depth of the character. And so she suggests that you need to find the inner value of your character, and you keep questioning them to discover this inner value. You keep asking questions and questions until you hit called rock bottom, or the what if moment. Or what? So what? Why is this? And as you go in asking why they do all these things, why are they this way, you will eventually hit their inner value, and that inner value is going to give rise to a trait. And so I'm going to kind of give you a personal example from one of my own characters that I developed. I write historical fiction based in medieval Ireland, and so my stories generally tend to have a strong romance thread as well. And when I initially started my story has a strong lead female, but her male counterpart needed to be equally strong, and he was very cardboard cut out when I first created him. I knew in my mind that my character, Gideon, was going to have to be a warrior's son, and he was aspiring to become a warrior like his father. But I didn't understand much beyond that. I knew what he looked like. I knew what I kind of envisioned him to be, and that he had to be a strong central character. But he, time and again, became shallow, and I didn't understand why. And so when I got into Brandilyn's book, I realized I needed to discover the inner values of this character. He needed to become more deep to me. And so I started asking the questions. Well, if he comes from a warrior family, that means that there's a heritage there, kind of like the character that Brandilyn Collins talked about, the one who had a father and a grandfather in the military. Well, the same was true for my character Gideon. His father is a renowned warrior in his clan, and the people look up to him. He has a reputation, and he trains men to fight, and he's done so with his sons. And so his sons have to carry on his reputation. And Gideon had a deep-seated need to be respected and to show honor, because that was important in his clan. Well, I wondered why that was important, if it was a general thing that was expected upon all warriors. And I came to the conclusion in the beginning, because he's a young teenage boy, well, not young, an older teenage boy, that he wanted to be respected, not only his clan, but by his older brother, who didn't really respect him, who kind of looked at him as the younger sibling who, you know, needed to grow up a little more. And you could see that. You could see why a younger brother would want to look up to an older brother who was already setting an example. The conflict came in that my character's older brother and his father are the antagonists in the story. These are not men to look up to. These are men of questionable character, and they do some pretty dastardly deeds in the story. So why should he look up to them? And then I began to ask the questions, so what? Why does Gideon look up to his brother and his father when they're doing these questionable things? And I realized Gideon is in conflict with his moral center. He is a moral man, and he grows up to become more of a moral man, but he has that deep need to be respected by others, and he wants people to see him as somebody who's dependable. He wanted his brother and his father to be dependable, and he discovers they're not. And so he grows up to be a man who is in contrast to what he thought was an ideal. later on, she talks about how you come to that inner value. And in Gideon's case, it was respect, that he wanted to be respected. But then you also want to find a trait that is unique to your characters. It's good to come to that strong core value, but we want them to do physical things that remind you of those inner values. And so she talked about developing physical traits or things that they do that kind of clue you into the character and their core value. And like maybe somebody has a nervous tick, or they're always twitching or doing something that makes them a little more personal, that makes them stand out from the other characters. What would Gideon do that would make him physically stand out from other people? And as I developed the character, I realized that there needed to be personal symbols that represented him, and it became his sword. And he fidgets or grips his sword to gain control, because he can't give the image that he is out of control or that he is losing his cool. And so to regain control in tense situations, he will subconsciously grip the pommel of his sword and clench it. And this became a secret, I guess, I don't know if secret is the word I want to say, but this became a tell in a lot of scenes where I would make just a subtle reference to him clenching the sword in a tense scene, and you knew he was trying to regain control and that poise. And
that's excellent, and that's such a great example to, Brandilyn has great examples too in her book, but that you've actually, I love how you've taken that and how you're sharing with us how you have done this yourself and given him, because I think that's really hard. We tend to want to give our characters our own traits.
Yes.
And to give them something different. I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. So that's it in the kind of a nutshell. You take your characters and you go from the basics, are they tall? Are they short? What color are their eye? Their hair color? What's their job? And you keep asking yourself questions. Well, why is this? What is it? What is their goal? What is their inner value? And then from the inner value, you discover the trait, and then see if you can come up with a little tell or some physical thing that they do to personalize those and reflect those, and you'll see that it really does deepen your characters.
Elaine had a question. Elaine, do you mind just, I know you wrote it out in the chat, if you'll just go ahead and ask Melissa.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt. You're doing so well, Melissa. I wanted to know, did you have to tell your readers that what they were seeing whenever he would grip his sword was an attempt to get back to regain control? Did you have to tell them that early on, or how did you introduce that so that your reader later would know that's what is going on? Does that make sense?
No, I didn't actually tell. It's something that developed, and he doesn't actually do it as much in my first book as he does in my second. So
okay.
Things with his sword, and in inner monologue and in action, you see that the sword becomes very important to him.
Right.
It's symbolic of his family, his heritage. It's a sword that he actually gets from his brother.
Okay.
And so,
I love that example.
Yeah,
very well done.
You see that he depends upon it more and more, and then you see in tense situations he begins to do that, and it becomes a tell every time he does it. Then you see, oh, he's doing this every time the situation is intense or he's experiencing a lot of emotional turmoil. He does it, and then he gets centered and stoic again, and so you see it becomes a physical tell without me having to actually explain it.
Cool.
Love it. And Sophia made a good point, just so everyone understands, because we talk about show don't tell so often, but the way Melissa's using the word tell here is, I love Sophia's definition. I'm just going to read it. It's based in your actions, telegraphing your next move, and that's what she learned in martial arts, which is really cool. Yeah. And we all do have those tells. We play cards sometimes, and Bethany says, my daughter says that I have a tell, so she knows what kind of hand I have, but she won't tell me what that tell is.
Good for her.
I know, but it's like, I think it's because I always put my high cards at one end, and she sort of knows then where I pull cards out that I have higher cards. So I think that's it, but she will not tell me for sure. Anything else on Secret One from anybody? Melissa, that was great. I love how you have taken that and developed that into a character. And even just reading this, the last couple of days, I have a manuscript that's really like in the final editing phases. But one of the problems is that character's desire has never been really quite clear. And this has just made me pop up with some things, and I think I'm going to have to write some new scenes because because it's like, oh my gosh, there is something deeper here that I didn't realize before, and it was from reading this book. So I mean, it's so excellent to do this.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, secret number 2 is action objectives. As we talked about earlier, Brandilyn gives these 4 Ds, and she gave a whole workshop on just these 4 Ds at the Mid-South Christian Writers Conference last year. So what she did in like an hour, I'm going to try to condense down into like 5 minutes. So, you know, you've got to read the book. You've got to read the book to get this. But anyway, talking about the objective. So we all know that in a story, the main character has to want something. And this is want with a capital W. It's the super objective. It's what they want, you know, what the whole story arc, the character arc is going to be about. And a very easy example is in Lord of the Rings. Frodo wants to get rid of that ring. You know, the whole story, 3 movies, is him being given this task, traveling, facing all these conflicts, all these, you know, horrible things happening to get to Mount Doom, right? So he can throw that ring into the fire and it will be destroyed. So that's his super objective. But then within each scene, characters also need an objective, and Brandilyn says that we need to make sure that this objective can be stated as a verb rather than a general state of being. So that means not to rely on to be verbs. Her example is, instead of saying, I want to be alone, which is just the state of being, I want to be alone, that doesn't really say too much. The better objective might be, I want to hurry my roommate out the door so I can have some time for myself. And it may be a subtle difference, but it's a big difference, because then now you have, well, how are you going to do that? It's so much more specific. How am I going to do that? How am I going to get my roommate to leave? Maybe the roommate doesn't want to leave. You really want the roommate to leave. Right there, you've got conflict, right? So anyway, the 4 Ds. The first one is desire. You have to know what your character wants, and like Melissa's already talked about, that's going to come from their inner values and the inciting incident, which, you know, we're not going to delve real deep into that, but that's part of the incident that starts the story and changes the character. So 3-point structure for a character's desire. Again, the desire must be stated in terms of an action verb. The desire must be very specific, and in fact, it should have 2 prongs to it. And I just love this. So here's the example she gives in the book. Say that your goal is, I want to earn $200,000 a year. If that's the only goal, it sounds a little selfish, right? It's like, okay, or like, well, so what, big deal. So that would be one prong. I want to make $200,000 a year. The second prong is so that I can pay for my sick mother's medical bills. Well, now that goal of making that much money a year is not selfish. I mean, it's a very unselfish reason. So the second prong helps to avoid selfishness and can lead to more ideas for conflict. I was thinking about this earlier, and it just shows you, okay, let's go back. So if your goal is to make $200,000 a year so that you can pay for your mom's medical bills, and say that you can earn $150,000 through your job, perhaps you work for a pharmaceutical company, you can get a $50,000 bonus if you participate in covering up some kind of, say, drug test gone wrong. But you're an honest person. That's one of your deep moral values, your deep inner values. You know, you're an honest person. So you're an honest person who needs to make a certain amount of money to help pay your mom's medical bills. And now you're faced with this dilemma. What are you going to do? Are you going to, you know, go against your inner value of honesty and help to make up this cover up so you can get that $50,000, which then will go to help pay your mom's medical bills, which will save her life, or do you not? So that's just kind of a little example of how when you have this two-pronged desire, there's room for conflict. And when you know your character's inner values, there's more room for conflict. Okay, and then the desire must be exactly right for the character in the story. And this is her example. So you could say, I want to never again lie to my husband so that I can rebuild trust in my marriage. That's very noble, right? And again, there was that, so that. I want to never again lie to my husband so that I can rebuild trust in my marriage. Or, I want to never again be caught in a lie so that I can rebuild trust in my marriage. I mean, it's just a few little words, but think how different then that character is. Those two characters have different inner values, and the conflicts that come up will be different. In the first case, the person who doesn't want to lie anymore, what if something happens and she's forced to lie to protect her husband's life or to protect the family in some way? And so now she's in that conflict. She's promised herself she's never going to lie again. But if she doesn't, there could be bad consequences. But if she does, it's going to not rebuild trust in her marriage. And in the second one, if she's just trying not to get caught in the lie. And so what, efforts will she make to not get caught in a lie so she can rebuild trust? So, there's kind of difference. And I have missed a little bit of the chat. So does anyone have anything they want to say on screen?
Well, what I mentioned in the chat was that I used to be a special ed teacher, and I was trained that goals can be somewhat open-ended, but objectives should always be specific, measurable, and attainable.
Absolutely.
So that you have a definite plus or minus that you can put in that checkbox.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So. That's really true. Thank you for that. Okay, so that was the first D, desire. The second D is distancing, and this means that your character has this one goal in mind, this desire, but there will be these conflicts, and each time that conflict is going to take them further away from reaching their goal. So there's that increased distancing, and that's just what you want to see as you write your novel. And if you're a plotter, you can sort of plan those things out ahead of time. I do want to say that Brandilyn makes it clear in her book, and she mentions it more than once, that this technique works for both plotters and pantsers, because even pantsers, those who write by the seat of their pants and don't plan out ahead of time, do know sort of some things that are going to happen, or what, you have at least a little bit of an idea, but you're going to be distancing. And then the third D is denial, which is usually that one pivotal scene towards the end. It could be a quick sequence of scenes. It's often called the crisis. And this is when all seems lost. And in stories with happy endings, the character somehow manages to turn things around, pushing aside the denial, and once again, aiming himself toward the path. So there's that desire, distancing, denial. And then some stories, though not every story, is going to have that fourth D, devastation. This is, it just takes the character so far off course that it's like things are worse than they ever were before. You can't really use devastation in all stories. Some stories just don't have, like a novella, maybe too short to have a devastation added to you. And if your story is just, a cute little sweet romance, you might not have a devastation, but suspense stories often do. So it kind of depends on your genre, the story you're trying to tell. So you have to think about that as you're planning out the Ds. In her book, in this book, she uses The Pearl by John Steinbeck to walk you through each of these, the desire, the distancing, the denial, and the devastation, and it's amazing. So I really, go back and read this part to really get an understanding of this, because you'll need it to go on to the other secrets. And I think with the first two secrets, it's going to just make your manuscript so much better. And then the others add to it, but these are the two things that you really, really want to get down, and then, and then move on. But these are like the foundation for everything else. And that's how I feel. Did you feel that way too, Melissa, or did you have a different perspective on that?
kind of agree with that. I think that's upset. Yeah.
All right. Anyone have anything else to say? We'll move on to secret 3.
Subtexting. This one is kind of hard to explain without giving an example. So I do actually have a little snippet of dialogue from my work in progress that we could look at if you are interested. Now, I admit that I'm a little nervous about showing this section of dialogue because it is still somewhat rough. I am in the revision process of this manuscript right now, so you will have to forgive the rough state of some of the context. But I think that the dialogue is fairly close to exemplifying what subtexting is all about. And in subtexting, the characters aren't always going to say what they mean. They're going to be subtle about things. But the one thing we want to remember is subtexting isn't always limited to the moments that we assume that they could be, like where a person maybe is tongue-tied and they don't know what to say, or it's a tense situation, or maybe these characters have just met and so they aren't going to be real forthright with one another. And subtexting isn't just limited to maybe one little portion of a conversation, maybe the entire conversation subtexted. There is no limit to subtexting. So let's see here if I can do this. All right, here, let's see. Come up. Okay, can everybody see the screen, the dialogue?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so this is just a little section scene from my second book in my series. And I'm just going to give you a little context because this won't make a whole lot of sense to you not knowing the story background. But in this scene, the heroine, Nessa, is meeting a man that she has a history with in the past. He's helped her to get key information to their clan that eventually got their chieftain to the throne of South Ireland. And so this guy, he has a questionable background. Nobody really knows much about him. He seems to be a double spy in essence. He's working for two different sides. And he suddenly showed up in a place that he was not meant to be. She doesn't know why he's here. And nobody knows about their history together. So she's managed to pull him off into a seemingly private area to talk with him and try to figure out what he's doing here. Another little background bit of information. You'll see this word, Brian. That's how you say it. It looks like Brehan, doesn't it? But that's a lawyer. And in medieval Ireland, Brian was a very established and well-respected individual. And this character, Brendan, is a noble by birth and a Brian. So he's a lawyer, and he's coming here under the pretense that he is going to arbitrate over a case that is very important to Nessa. But she thinks he's got mixed motives. So we'll go into this dialogue and see how their conversation progresses, and see if you can pick out the subtexting that's going on in the context of this.
Melissa, can you make it a little bit bigger, or will it let you do that?
Okay, sure.
Oh, that's helpful.
That's wonderful.
Okay. All right. So here, Brian, is it? How can a man who's seen little more summers than I be counted among the esteemed lawgivers? Nessa met him face to face, arms folded, daring him to lie. I'm a fast learner. Brendan pressed off the tree to loom over her. Or did Anhuan not tell you this? Having forgotten how tall he was, Nessa peered up at an uncomfortable angle to continue meeting Brendan's gaze. Her discomfort increased as he drew ever nearer. He was a good handbreadth taller than Gideon. Unless he summoned you, I should think even Anhuan would question your presence here. So why should Lord Brian trust you to arbitrate on his behalf? Come now, Nessa Rowe, have I not served you well in the past? Your king holds a woman's seat in the stead of mine, though little thanks I received for my part. His brilliant blue eyes flashed playfully as he held her gaze. Oh, he was a handsome devil, and he well knew it. If not for Gideon, she might find herself swept away by such a man. Nessa distanced herself from him a pace, though she grinned in spite of herself. My thanks, though I oft wonder if your intent was truly so noble. He tutted, never doubt it. His eyes shifted skyward. So now, his cloaked shoulders hit the wall once again. I must ask myself, why should the fair Nessa vest herself in this case? Because the guild tongue vests himself. She let her sarcasm be felt. That's a nickname for him, by the way. And Nessa sighed, seeing she only provoked his amusement. Gideon McDavin is my betrothed. Pity. The constant parry and thrust of their conversation lent her no further ground. How Brendan's skill at dodging her every question. Sorry, there's a goof right there. Perhaps it's time to drive the blade home. As yet, no one knows I've a knowledge of your dealings. Lord Brian will have an audience with me when he learns of this. I do hold his lady's ear. Brendan's eyes narrowed, drawing his brow to a hard, flat line on his high forehead. The purse of his lips drew in his hollowed cheeks, lending a stark severity to his features. Neither seek nor shun the fight. I commend your boldness, but tread carefully. I am not so easily crossed. Nessa seized his arm, digging her nails in for effect. Nor am I. He let his eyes trail the length of her body. You know how to tempt a man. The protrusion in his throat rose some, and he inclined his head toward her. Making so bold to touch me in public, you risk any standing you possess with these Valcashans. He spoke the name as though it were a profane word. A betrothal may not be as imminent as you surmise. Though she fought the urge, fear caused her to cast a furtive glance over their surroundings. Indeed, there were enough people mingling in the distance to perceive them and draw the wrong conclusions. Be at ease. Brenton slid her hand from his arm. We both are vested in this trial. If my assurances fail to gain your trust, then seek Amelin to balm your fears. In the meanwhile, he slipped past her. Stray from my path, and I shall not trot on yours.
That's excellent.
Wow.
Wow.
Do you see the subtexting going on in there, in that scene? It's not just superficial. These two are trying to dig at one another and find out what's going on, but they're not getting anywhere. They know that neither one trusts one another. But yet there is an undertext, a need of trust in that scene. And that's kind of how subtexting can work. It's just a very small example.
I just love the conflict. You just hinted at so much conflict in just that short scene. And it's like, wow, I want to read your book.
And that's only the second book. So that's a little bit of a spoiler right there for anybody.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh. Does anyone have any comments or questions about that? That was
well, there's also a clear subtext of attraction between them. They both love and hate each other, and they can't figure out which is stronger. So that's a very, very well done.
Yeah, Rhonda's right. Yeah.
There is.
And she never says it. That's the beauty of it. It's never said. It's just shown throughout their actions. So
there is. Yeah, exactly. And you can subtext more than one thing. Obviously, by that example there's several subtexts going on in one scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Leslie asked, is it always best to show the subtext in dialogue?
I've seen it shown in actions that characters do. They'll act out in a way that is contrary to their internal emotions and what they're feeling, and that's used as well to hide an emotion, but yet convey that the other character could almost be cluing in on it. Yeah, I think that it can be showed in actions as well. The dialogue is oftentimes the most effective means.
I think the actions give it more texture, and I loved how you had she dug in her nails and he slid her arm from him, and yeah, and
that's another good way to do it. And I've mentioned before that I'm part of Jerry Jenkins' guild, and one thing that he really emphasizes is to mix action and scene descriptions within dialogue in beats like that. Mm-hmm. So instead of saying he said, she said, a lot of times it's good to get a beat in, or that little snippet of action or something that they do that indicates not only who's talking, but also shows a deeper context of what they're about, or what their scene is, so that you can kind of have a setting without having to go into elaborate descriptions. So it serves a lot of purposes.
I will say, I just had a critique in preparation for the Ohio Christian Writers Conference, and it was very eye-opening. And one of the things, if you can see this book, oh, it's reversed. Isn't that fun? It's called the Emotion Thesaurus. And my critiquer recommended this to me because it gives the emotion you're trying to convey, and then an action or something they can do that communicates that emotion without saying he felt anxious.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a fan of that one too, Rhonda.
How fun.
I just ordered it. I have this critique last Tuesday, and I just ordered it. I haven't even cracked it open yet, but I'm already excited to look at it and see how it'll improve my fiction.
It's good. It really is good. I like the context. And I was actually doing something like that before I discovered those books, never really realized it. I mentioned character sketches and being really elaborate in the way that you explore your characters and their desires. Well, one thing I also realized was that I was woefully ignorant of the kinds of words and things that I needed to express those desires. So I started making my own thesaurus of emotional words and things like that, or words pertaining to certain periods and thoughts and things like that. I just started categorizing, and I have this really elaborate Word document with different words categorized in emotions and things like that, and it really does. It helps tremendously.
That's great. Wow. So you could publish that sometime.
Really?
Yeah.
Turn it already got it one.
I'm sorry, Elaine, what did you say?
This might sound very simplistic, but as I'm listening to this, and I'm not really a fiction writer, although I have got one children's book written, and anyway, long story. But what it has made me think, and it's a very simplistic view of it, but if we as writers can evoke, if we can write so that our words would tell actors how to act out a scene without putting it in parenthetical phrases, without saying enter stage left, if we can use our words to describe what the characters should be doing if they're playing this out on a stage, then we've done what Melissa has just done in text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good. All right. Anything else about subtexting? Secret 4. Coloring passions. And in this context, passions can mean emotions, or it can mean personality traits. So she talks about coloring passions almost like beads that may kind of look like they're all the same color from a distance, but when you look at them up close, some might be like light yellow and go into greens or browns, so that they really aren't all the same color. They just seem that way from a distance, but not close up. You see the different colors. So she's talking about, really fine-tuning both emotions and personality traits. And this comes right from the book. Love under varied circumstances can encompass such feelings as embarrassment, shame, jealousy, anger, fear. The more sweeping the passion, the more varied and even contradictory these feelings can be. And once again, the traits and emotions are going to spring from your character's inner values, which you find out, you determine what those are in secret number 1. So again, it's just keeps building on that. I'm not going to go real deeply into this because we want to make sure we get to all of them, but I, again, encourage you to get the book and read it to find your passions components. Like if you're talking about love, exactly what are you talking about there? Also, you want to find the passion's opposite. If you're looking for the opposite of a trait, you want to look within the character themselves. I think this is where this example comes from. I didn't put an example in my notes. I'm sort of guessing here. But like we talk about like someone who talks all the time, that's their trait. So they talk all the time, except when they don't talk. So what would happen? What would be a situation that would occur when they are speechless? So that might be what you would be looking at there. To find the most opportunities for portraying the opposite of an emotion, look to other characters. And she gave this really great example of a crossing guard and a child. And this is something she actually witnessed. She was stopped, crossing guard had stopped her, but this truck is coming from a different direction and it is not stopping. And this little child is walking across the street and the crossing guard is waving her sign. And this truck just keeps coming. Finally slids to a stop. The crossing guard, I mean, she just yells at the driver. Of course, she's so frightened out of her wits, turns around, realizes the little boy, instead of continuing across the street, he is standing behind her. And what does she do? She yells at him, "Why are you still here?" Now, those of us who are moms, we have had those kinds of situations. The child disappears in the store, you're frantic, you find them, you hug them, and then you say, "Why did you run off? Why didn't you stay with me?" So it's just like, there again, this crossing guard cared enough about this child to just stand between the truck and the child and then express that. So there's fear, there's protection, there's that fierceness, that caring, love, but then it goes into anger and it goes into relief and then it goes into anger again. You know, I mean, it's just this revolving kind of thing. And these are the different coloring of passions. So she writes that the intensity of one emotion leads to the next, and she does that with other examples in the book too, which is really great. And this was really interesting. She writes, and it was kind of in this whole crossing guard story, a truth I've discovered about anger. It's a secondary emotion. It always springs from something else. I thought that was fascinating, not only for our characters, but just for me, for life. It's like the emotions it springs from can vary wildly. Disappointment, betrayal, fear, even relief. Anger always comes from something else. So if you're going to have your character be angry, you have to show what leads up to that anger. It can't just come out of nowhere. So I thought that was really good. And I think that's about all I'm going to say about that. That was kind of a complex thing. I mean, she's got even like a little equation: inner values plus desire, those two things, plus conflict equal emotion. I mean, so this is a chapter you really want to dig into. So unless anyone else has anything to say, just we'll move on. Anybody? Okay, secret 5.
Okay, so let me move on to inner rhythm. And this one actually is pretty simple in this context. There is more that she elaborates on it, but I think for the sake of time, we'll just go over the basics of what it is. An inner rhythm betrays your character's emotions. So you can use actual rhythm to show what your characters are thinking. She suggests that you literally beat out a rhythm to match the emotion that you envision your character is feeling. And this is subjective. This rhythm can be different to everybody. You know, she talked about the actor, the director, telling people to each beat out a rhythm according to the characters that they were embodying, and everybody's rhythm was different, and they were expecting other people to understand why these rhythms were the way they were. And like, no, the rhythm is personal. This is just how you feel, and you need to convey it in your characters. So she gave the example of a woman driving on a really sunny, warm day. And so first she suggested to beat out the rhythm of the scene. So how you picture this day, picture this warm, relaxing, sunny day. What would be a rhythm in your mind that would embody a warm, relaxing, sunny day? So you get to going on it. It's probably nice and easy, maybe a few little extra side beats going. You're relaxed. Pay attention to the way your body is flowing as you're imagining this rhythm going in your mind. Then you picture your character. And in this scene that she talked about, this woman is tense. She's running late for something. She's got to be there, and she's having car problems, and there's this guy driving you know, contrary to what she's driving is going too slow, or there's maybe if something happens and she suddenly got to slam on the brakes. What is the rhythm going on in this character? Where is it? Staccato, it's tense. And if you're beating out the staccato rhythm, what is your body doing? Automatically, your shoulders are binding up, your neck feeling tight, maybe your jaw's clenched. And then you try to combine these two rhythms, this easygoing rhythm and then this tense staccato thing. How did the two clash? What does it do to you physically to try to keep these two rhythms going? What is it doing to your body? And you'll notice as you analyze yourself and what you're physically doing, that it gives rise to actions that your characters could actually play out. And you see a contrast between them and the setting, and it makes them more real.
And that's hard. I was trying to do, as I was reading, I was trying to do like the two different beats, and I'm not musical anyway, but it was hard. So it's almost like that staccato beat sort of always overtakes the easy beat, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess that's true, right? I mean, that is what happens in real life. But
if you think,
yeah,
in the context of this character who's in this car, she's no longer aware of the setting. She's overwhelmed by what's going on internally. And that same thing will happen with characters. Oftentimes they will be in conflict with their setting or with another character. She even mentions that as well. You might have two characters with two conflicting rhythms. Therein brings about the conflict and the depth.
It can be embarrassing to like get up and act out, you know, I mean, even if no one's around. I always feel a little self-conscious about doing that, but I do it sometimes, and it's amazing. It's just an interesting thing to do, and I would encourage you to do that. Like if your actor is feeling something, try to get up and actually say it how they would say it, or, you know, feel that. I had a character whose hands were tied up behind her back one time, and so I laid on the floor and put my hands behind my back and realized, oh my gosh, you know, that's so uncomfortable, but it's like uncomfortable in your shoulders. So, I mean, you know, did you know that? Like if your hands are tied behind your back, it makes your shoulders hurt. So, you know, you just kind of do these kinds of things, and yeah. Rhonda.
Yeah.
You don't need to cover your webcam. We want to see it.
I'm afraid of conspiracy theories. You know that Big Brother's watching me through my webcam.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. But yeah, I think Brandilyn also encouraged us to do that too, to really, in one of the sections, I'm not sure I remember which one, but to really dig deep and to relive some hard moments.
Yes, the final one.
Okay, well then I won't say any more about that. I'll let you do that. Okay, secret 6, restraint and control. An actor creates character through choice of movements. A novelist creates a character through choice of words. So she's, oh my gosh, what page am I on? Okay, here we go. So she says we have to split into two different people. And so our first person is right in there, crying, laughing, feeling everything our characters are feeling. And then our other person is kind of out here thinking, what's the best way to do this? You know, do I need to start a new paragraph here? You know, what are my word choices? So you kind of got two different things going on at the same time. I guess part of that, though, too, comes with the drafting. Like you just write a really rough first draft where you put all that emotion in, then you can kind of go back and let that second person sort of take over. It just depends on what works best, I think, for you as far as those techniques. But it is kind of like two things going on. Sentence. So she talks about two writing techniques here, very specifically sentence rhythm, which goes back to what Melissa was just talking about, and compression. So in sentence rhythm, a long sentence tends to have a languid beat. It takes time to read a long sentence, and that time is translated in the reader's head as time passing in your scene. So these are sentences that will probably have like past participles, the ing words in them, you know, oh gosh, I can't come up with an example off the top of my head, but you know, it's going to be just kind of long, and that beat is going to be slow, and it's going to be very calming. Short, choppy sentences are jarring, and so when you're writing action and suspense scenes, you want your sentences to be short, so that beat is like this. So, you know, there's some guidelines. The one exception to the long sentence is being more of a lulling sentence or a lulling beat is when there's what she calls the beat of chaos. And in chaos, and she gives a great example in her book there too, it seems like there's this mixture. You're going to have long sentences and short sentences together, and you might have repetition because you want things to be just really unpredictable to get that sense of chaos in the scene. So those are just a few little guidelines. Again, the higher the action level, the shorter your sentences should be. Fight scenes, divide the action and reaction into separate sentences or short phrases within the same sentence. So that's sentence rhythm, and you just kind of have to develop an ear for that. Compression is the second writing technique she talks about, and this is getting rid of all unnecessary words, replacing them with the exact right word, using vivid verbs, using adjectives and nouns that are packed with meaning. Every word should count, every single one. Writing vividly means writing in a way that creates a picture in the reader's mind. Again, use the most specific verb possible, not just walk, but stroll or amble, or not just run, but race, or, you know, whatever you want to use. Pay attention to the adjectives and nouns you choose, and look for unusual ways to express your thoughts. Vividness leads to the elimination of all of excess words. The more vivid you are, the less words you're going to have that just don't need to be there. And I will tell you, Brandilyn uses both works from classic literature to, at the end of each chapter, she's got an extract from a classic piece of literature and something from something she has written to show these principles and to demonstrate them. And she is, oh my, an excellent writer. I mean, when you read just the pieces that she puts in there, it's like, no wonder this woman is the success that she is. Her writing is phenomenal. I've read one of her books called Sidetracked. It is one that she uses in this, and it was very suspenseful, very, very good. And I just wanted to like stop everything and read all of her other books, because just from the examples, they were so good. So yeah, if you want to read a master, read Brandilyn's suspense novels with these principles too. So that's about all for that one. Just sentence rhythm, pay attention to that, and pay attention to compression, being very vivid in your writing.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. You can go on and on and on about the different kinds. Yeah. So the last secret, the seventh secret, is emotion memory, and we touched on that. This again kind of is something that would force you to get out of your comfort zone a little, but Brandilyn suggests doing it where nobody else is around. So you can embarrass yourself and nobody else will see this. The question comes in emotion memory, and the use of it is, how can I portray a character who is completely opposite or would do something totally far off in left field from what I would ever do or whoever I am? Like, how could I portray a mass murderer, a serial killer, somebody who is sadistically minded, and you're not, obviously. You've never done anything. Maybe you've never even thought about killing a person. And so,
anyway, we hope none of you are.
So how can I portray somebody like this when I am not this person? And she says that, and she cites the actor Stanislavski again, that anybody can draw from emotion memory and build upon an experience to make it convey the opposite of who you are, because everybody's experienced all the base emotions that can build up to these elaborate examples in these characters. I wish that I could read her whole example of the fly, because that is just excellent. And if you guys get the book, I highly recommend reading that chapter, because you crack up reading her example of the fly. She gave an example of the actor talking to a woman who was just appalled that anyone could suggest she could portray murderer, that she would have anything in common with murder. And he asked, well, have you ever killed a mosquito? Well, we can all picture the frustration that we would experience with a mosquito biting us, and you just want to get that sucker, smack him. What is he doing, sucking my blood and putting his infested little germs in my body? And you start to really analyze how you would react to these things. You realize it does build up on hatred and anger and all of the feelings that you could picture in somebody who would do something sadistic. And so she suggests that you call back on your own emotion memory and tap into that. And if you can tap deep into your own emotions and experiences, even in the littlest things, you can write anything without fear of feeling that it's not going to be believable. Any one of our 5 senses or a combination of them can release emotion memories. So we go back to an experience or an emotional moment in our life that is similar to the character you're trying to write. And she suggests that you retell it to yourself out loud. So you find a place where you can be alone and you don't worry about anyone hearing you. And you out loud retell the story to yourself and try to remember everything that you felt in that moment, all the emotions, all the things that happened, all of the senses that you can recall, what you smelled, what you might have tasted or touched in that moment, what you saw, everything that you can draw on. Tell yourself that in as much detail as you can, but don't write it down. In the process of doing this, think about the emotions that you're feeling as you're telling yourself. Pay attention to what your body's doing. Are you getting chills retelling yourself this story? Are you physically getting tense if it's a very high angry moment, a moment of frustration that happened in your life? What is your body doing in that moment? How are you feeling? And then convey those physical reactions and emotions that you're feeling yourself and translate them into your characters and expound upon them in the context of the story. And you'll find that you really are getting into the mind of the character. Oops, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Wow, that was a great explanation, and that does seem like such a scary thing to do, but it may be what you need to do to tap into the emotions that we don't want to face sometimes, so that we can write them well for our characters.
And the more you do it too, you can actually do it internally too. The more you practice, you can actually envision it in your mind, and the actual action isn't as necessary. I've found personally. I can kind of get myself into the moment more now that I've done it more often.
Oh wow, nice.
But sometimes you do. You have to physically make yourself act it out, or even like the example you said, where you go and you figure what position they're in. Are they tied up? Go and experience it to a degree. If you can call back on something like, oh, maybe you've never broken a bone, but you got a character whose leg was broken, and you've got to try to think, what is he going through? What could I pull back on that would do that? I've drawn back on moments of extreme pain and tried to think how that could be conveyed for that moment. And and now don't forsake going to other people who may have had experiences as well.
Yeah, that's very helpful too. Brandilyn says in the book, and I know this is true for me, and I've heard Vonda Skelton, who's a writer, say the same thing, and I'm sure it's true for people in this group and people listening on the replay. Even as she's going through something, there's like a little piece of her that's over here, sort of thing. Yeah, I need to remember this and how what this was like, so that if I'm in this, one of my characters are in this situation, I'll know what to put down, or that kind of thing. So just allow that. It's okay to do that. That's fine. I have one little closing quote I want to read, but does anyone else have anything to say? We're getting right past the hour, but this was great. Go ahead.
I will say, once I read Brandilyn's book and started thinking about actors, it makes a difference. Sometimes I go back and I watch a movie. If a scene was really gripping to me, what were they saying? How were they saying it? And what were they doing? And rather than just getting all engrossed in it and experiencing it, if you start to pick it apart, you will see actors doing things that could be helpful when you write.
Interesting. That's a good help too. Thanks for sharing that. This is a little bit off, but not quite. I remember reading something ages and ages ago, so I'm not going to get all the details right, but it was someone writing about why Meryl Streep and what a great actress she is. And they were comparing two roles of hers, and one of them, she heard that somebody that she loved had died, and she just falls apart. And that's how that character played that. And in the second movie that they were contrasting, I think it was Out of Africa, and she hears that a man, I guess, I didn't see the movie, but that she was in love with had died. But that relationship may have been more secret, and she's in a room with other people, and she just makes the slightest motion with her finger and maybe a cigarette. And he was talking about, here's this great actress, and she knew these characters well enough to know this one would fall apart. This one had to hide her grief and could just barely do anything to show how it affected her. And this goes back to, even from the very first Secret, what is your character's inner values? How will they react? Because they're not all going to react the same. And you have to know what's true to your character and not just put on your character what you would do in a situation. You got to think what they would do. And then you have to relive it and help them live it out. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to read this one thing that she writes towards the end of her book. She writes, ultimate characterization is an art that requires our lifetime pursuit, a pursuit that rests upon fervent, continual studying and recording of the human condition. So that's what I want to leave you all with. Melissa, thank you. This was great. Thanks for those of you who stayed on. Thanks for people in the comments. That was really great to read your stuff too. I think next week, am I right that we're having comparative section of book proposals?
Yes.
Yes, with Sherilyn Brisbano and Bethany Moorhead will be with us, and they're going to be talking about how to do that part of a book proposal at the comparative title section. We're so glad y'all were with us today. Join us anytime. We're here every Tuesday morning, 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central. We'd be glad to have those of you watching the replay join us in the chat. And those of you who are here, stay on for the after party. Bye-bye, everybody.